Ujjayi, and welcome to the Wisdom of the Nile show. I'm Katasta Fakara, and I'm here with my brother
Nehibsa Nesebik.
Nehibsa Nesebik. Okay, so welcome, like we said, another day to the Wisdom of the Nile show. Sharing wisdom from the Nile Valley region, the region of our ancestors, the region which is known as the cradle of civilization, where so much greatness came from where what we would now call superpowers came from. So when we say superpowers, we mean the nations who rose to high heights. And when we talk about, Kemet and the River Nile, and which we call Happy, along that region, there was it's a whole area of where knowledge came from, because as people, we always congregate near the waters. From the waters is where life as we know it comes. Even when we go back into the ancient beginnings of the universe, the becoming is from the Nun, the waters. So humanity had to reside beside the waters, and it's beside the waters where the Kemet tradition flourished. That was many thousands of years ago. But we give thanks that the knowledge that reached a pinnacle in Kemet, and like we said, it's a whole region, so we don't forget the other areas that surrounding what they now call Egypt, but we know as Kemet. That whole area was a birthplace of the heights of knowledge. So we give thanks and we acknowledge our ancestors, and we acknowledge those traditions that maintained that knowledge, that we now today can even present this radio show with the knowledge of our ancestors. And so one of the people that we have to acknowledge are the Dagomba people. It is through the knowledge of the Dagomba people that even myself and the Hipsa is here to be able to share the information that is shared on this radio station. They kept the knowledge for thousands of years that their ancestors passed down to them. And so during the show, we'll be sharing knowledge of the ancients, knowledge from the Nile Valley region. And we have recently had 3 explosive shows when Naba Irita Shenmira, son of Naba Lamusa Morandenibeg, high priest of the Wasirian temples, came and imparted his knowledge.
As they say, it was knowledge and wisdom from the Nile, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah.
wisdom from the Nile. And it was so magical that it shook Babylon to their core, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely shook them, and we saw how the reactions that came from them because of the knowledge that was given. So at this point, I also want to acknowledge the divine world and the hierarchies of the divine world, and we want to acknowledge our ancestors and the world of the ancestors. Yes, my brother, we have a good show lined up today. So, you know, last week we were saying whether our priest Naba would be here with us again the fourth week. He's not physically going to be here with us, but the teachings that he came and brought are here. The knowledge
definitely
is
That's
here.
why we're here. And
So
we're grateful for that, really.
Right, so we will be sharing that knowledge with our brothers and sisters. Okay, so the Wisdom of the Nile show is brought to you by the Earth Center. The Earth Center is a non-profit, cultural, spiritual organization that was set up by Neb Naba Lamusa Modern Denbeg over 20. Well, actually, and that was good because when Naba came, he actually corrected, because actually it was longer than 20 years ago, but it came to Chicago just over 20 years ago. And so the Earth Center actually is here as a mission from the temples, and we always have to go back to the temples because we know of the temples in Thebes, the temples in what they call Thebes and Memphis. These were centers of learning that the whole of humanity looked to for guidance when it came to divinity, but not just to the divine world, but to mathematics, to astrology, to medicine. These were the repositories of knowledge. And Neb Naba represents those temples in modern day time. And even now, as I think about those things, I'm just like, wow. You know, I don't take that for granted. I mean, for that knowledge to be held for so long, that even now those of us who went through the Caribbean and went through the Middle Passage, that we now can come back and still lay hands on that knowledge is really astounding.
It is really, because when you really think what we've gone through and what the European, if imagine if this knowledge had got into their hands and what they got, if they really understood it, what would things be now? So, it's like they did a good job really in preserving the knowledge really for as long as they did. And as custodians really, it's like they recognize really right that there has to be a shift, because for the survival of humanity to exist, then, this is why they decided that they're going to have to kind of say come back to the people and basically who they were keeping away from really, right, so that we can educate humanity, not just African people, but humanity itself. And we need this knowledge really, because if we don't get it, we can see our destruction. We see the way things is going now. So this is for the benefit of humanity, really.
Definitely. And so I'm thankful that I'm here today sharing with yourself the Wisdom of the Nile show, so that we can share some of the information. I think we're getting a little feedback on the mics, but hopefully we can sort that out. Soon. We can get that sorted. Yes. So for those who want to know more about the Earth Center, we'll be sharing details about the Earth Center. We'll be giving out numbers. We'll be telling you, if you want to, what we call take the road of initiation, we'll be sharing some of that information with you later on in the show. But this week's show, we're going to have a topic, and we want to each week have a topic for our listeners, so that if you want to join in, the conversation, the reasoning, you may do so. And I'll give you the number when it's time to call in. So for this week, we want to know, is there a place for African spirituality and traditions in the modern world? Is there a place for African spirituality and traditions in the modern world? We are listening to the Wisdom of the Nile show. I'm Katasta Fakara, and we will be coming back on the other side to take the show to the next segment.
Teach me, teach me, teach me, teacher. Teach high and I am a teacher. Teach me, teach me, teacher. Teach high and I am a teacher. I never believe. I always early. I never have sent. I always present. That's why I and I not sit down in no back bed. That he like to be bright, bright, bright. So bright, teach me, teacher. Bright, bright, bright. Teach me, teacher. So bright, teach me, teacher. African teaching is a part of our culture. Oh, yeah. Part of our teach me, teacher. Teach I and I am a teacher. I admit we go to school, but we never finish. That until when we reach up on the side of Africa, wherein I and I can be taught by African teacher. Oh, teacher. I and I can be taught by African teacher. Teach me, teacher. Teacher, I and I am a teacher. Teach me, teacher. Teacher, I and I am a teacher. Oh, right. Teacher, I am a read. I and I like to be taught by African teacher. Oh,
Teach me,
right.
teacher.
Naughty like to be bright, so bright, so bright, so bright. Bright, oh, bright. Bright, naughty, bright, naughty, bright, naughty, bright. Oh, right. Naughty like to be
Music of the Burning Spear. Teachings from the Wisdom of the Nile.
is a part of I and I. Oh, right. Naughty teacher. American teacher. African teacher. Teacher and I and I and I. I'm a teacher. Teacher and I and I and I. Naughty like.
Yes. Our ancient African teachings. And when we talk about the destruction of the black civilization and the destruction of African, or the attempt to destroy African spirituality, that's why we're looking at, is it relevant today? One of the things we have to look at, what is African spirituality? Because many people when we talk about African spirituality, it conjures up many different kind of images in the mind. You know, when we get later in the show, we you know, we're going to talk about some other aspects of the African spirituality, because, you know, there has to come a time. Everything has a cycle. And there comes a time when the truth must come back up, you know? So, you know, many people think, well, what is African spirituality, you know? But science have shown that Africa is the cradle of civilization. And when we talk about science, because we have our own traditional science, so let's be more specific and say that European science have shown us that Africa is the cradle of civilization. Our ancestors know that because that's where we come from. But even their science shows us that. And any people, when they look to perceive nature, when they look to perceive the divine world, they are going to identify that from their own perception, from their own culture. So we call that the cosmogony. The cosmogony. And the cosmogony is the structure of how a society perceives their existence to be, how they understand creation. So when you're talking about African spirituality, we are talking about how our ancestors understood what divinity was, how they understood creation, nature, and their place within creation, their place within nature. How did they fit? They were studying the laws of the divine and the laws of nature. So when you're talking about African spirituality, you are talking about the black man's understanding, the African's cosmogony, their understanding of creation, their understanding of divinity. So to ask if there is a place for African traditional spirituality, to me, really is a no-brainer. Because everyone has their belief system out there, their cosmogony, how they see God, how they see creation. So the very fact that we have to ask that question means that something has gone terribly wrong, where our spirituality, we have to almost ask, should we be present in today's world? And what the Dagomba people and others, because our understanding of the spiritual realm is vast, our ancestors' understanding, because I myself am a student learning on the road, and I'm so happy to be learning about the authentic African spirituality. It is so vast, you know, and we have different aspects of the culture. So from the Nile Valley, we also know, for example, that the Vodun comes from that region. The Yoruba comes from that region. We have knowledge from many aspects of our African spirituality deriving from the Nile Valley region. So it's so vast. But African spirituality, is there a place in the modern world? And our sister Karsati is actually going to share something from one of the Firefly magazines. So for those who know about the publications that the Earth Center put out, there are many publications that the Earth Center put out, and the Firefly is one of them. And I know she's going to share something with us looking at European religion and the tradition. So Sister Karsati.
Ujai, everyone, Ujai. This is an article from the Firefly magazine. It's going to be an extract from this article entitled Spotlight, a link to our past and future. Despite the consistent attack on traditional cultures by the modern colonizers, traditional cultures remain strong around the world. Example of these traditional cultures won't be in the news and can't be found on modern maps. In fact, the colonial map of the world falsely leads people to believe that all areas of the planet lie within colonial boundaries. On their map, every inch of land, some covered with ice and even areas underwater, is under the dominion and control of a colonial government. This impresses the authority of the colonial system on the mind of whoever is viewing their map. To validate this impression, the colonizer promotes the idea that its authority comes from being representative of the people within its national boundaries. For this to be true, a consensus of all people in a given region must be in agreement prior to the establishment of any boundaries. A history book reveals that the establishment of modern colonial boundaries or nations has been decided by the business interests of the colonial powers. History also tells us that the colonial boundaries were imposed by force. It is evident that up until this day, these boundaries are still imposed by force. In fact, force is one of the two things that maintains the colonial authority. Any colonial government, by design, has its military ready to go anywhere within its boundaries and force people to obey its will. The same colonial government, again by design, can be easily corrupted by money to allow business interests to pull the strings of politicians. The result is a nation of people held hostage by a military that ensures the continued exploitation of the populace and their natural environment. It is only from the willingness and capability to threaten people by force that colonial governments claim dominion over all territory around the planet. The second tool that maintains a colonial authority is a dependent populace. The colonial methods of disrupting traditional cultures by force, religion, or other means have been detailed in previous articles in this magazine. The result of this disruption is a migration to the industrial cities of colonial culture. In these cities, people become dependent upon the colonial system and lose their cultural identity. They become incapable of speaking their traditional languages, passing on their traditional knowledge, or living in harmony with nature the way their ancestors have done for tens and thousands of years. If we consider all of the good that humanity has to offer, the things that people use to construct a positive life for themselves and maintain harmony with nature, we can trace the origins of these things to traditional culture. Just as every region has a history, within every region is a traditional culture that has survived colonialism to a greater or lesser degree. In order to survive through this stage of colonial attack, we all must maintain ourselves as models of the traditional culture that our ancestors have passed on to us. Those separated from their traditional cultures must trace back to them using cultural links like names, values, languages, distinguishing features, etc. Towards building the world we wish to see, we will need to use our minds to sort through the confusion and contradiction that the colonial system presents to us as a modern culture. To do this, we must continue with what our ancestors have left us.
Okay, wow, Kalsati. Do you want to share any of the insights that, is there any further reason you want to give us that? Because, that, that's so apt in terms of, how the, we could say European, but any of those forces, the colonizing forces, for them to remain, up, they consistently have to make sure nobody else survives. So, yeah. Sorry, we're just making sure that we can hear you, Kasati. Can we hear you?
Yes.
Are you up and no?
No, you're not coming
We're
through
not
clear.
hearing you. We're not hearing you. Let's make sure that we're hearing you. Go on again, Kasati. That's all right.
Yes,
We can do it through here. Okay. Yeah. So for them to maintain their hold on this on power by deceiving the world, they have to ensure that no other power exists, no other power can rise. They have to ensure that they're constantly keeping us down, and this has been over 2,000 years. What say you?
Well, yes, with their religion, their education, their media, they've consistently kept us down. They've consistently kept away from us what we rightfully knew was ours. And now it's the time for us to rise.
And this was, I mean, as you were saying there, the colonialism. I mean, when we look at like the Berlin Conference, I mean, when they came in, they were like very barbaric, fighting amongst themselves, and there's nothing changed within their nature, that they were robbing and killing against each other. So they had to come up with a way of dividing Africa. Otherwise, they would have self-destruct themselves. So this is when the Berlin Conference came about, really, right, where they had to come to some agreement, really, as to who was going to occupy what space. And that's how it was divided up amongst them, really. And, I mean, we know about, what's his name, King Leopold, who massacred millions and millions of Africans, really, right? And he took it as his own personal possession. And the French, they were quite big in it. The British, really, right? So they recognized really that our language, that a lot of things lied within our language. So it was important for them, really, right, to destabilize us. Even to this day, that's why you find many Africans, they're reluctant to want to speak their own language. And even the way that they dress, they stigmatize us. So they have a way of coming in, seeing what our strength is, and commercializing it. So they take the value away from it. And these are some of the ways that they use, really, to kind of to still keep us down. And we see the flow, the influx of churches, how prevalent they are. Like place like Jamaica, per square mile, the amount of churches. I went to the Gambia, and literally near enough every other building is a church. And the people, I know they put their indigenous language aside behind, but that was like imposed on them, really. So, you go into the buses, there's someone there coming on the buses. Every bus we got onto, they were preaching there, preaching back. So the indoctrination was very, very strong, really. And with social media and these kind of things now, that's just helping to really enforce it even more and more.
And, we know that when the Greeks, the Romans, and the Persians came in to the Nile Valley region, this is what they saw. They saw people who were adhering to the divine principles. They saw people who were striving. The whole society was built on focusing on the divine world, trying to raise your qualities, trying to walk the divine path, and understanding that there is this cycle of reincarnation, dying and born again, but dying and being reborn. And while you're here on the earth, through the time that you're in this part of existence that we call life, that is about raising your qualities so that you can take the next step towards the divine world. And on coming and seeing a people that were focused on the divine world, they found ways to come and infiltrate that, because they saw that these people, they couldn't deviate them. They couldn't, no matter what they tried, they couldn't take these people off of this divine road. And one of the products that we have that people can get from the Earth Center is the Code of Human Behavior, the 77. And these were a set of principles, guidelines that people were following so that they could walk closer towards the divine world. And when they came in and they saw the principles, one of the things they did was bring in this idea of liberty, this god of Liber. And when Naba was here, he was speaking to that, this god Liber, where basically liberty, anything goes, and they put forward, the thinking that, well, actually, you don't have to live 77, because if you just break one, you've broken all 77. So why bother try to live like that? You can just follow 10 and everything's okay. You can just do 2 and, and God will forgive you. Even if you make a mistake, God will forgive you. So they found and they understood that we were people who spirituality was at the top of the list for us. We were people who are very spiritual. And so when you talk about there being a church on every corner, because our people naturally gravitate towards divinity, but our ancestors had our own. When we perceived the world of the gods, our ancestors made that vow that we would walk the road of the divine by following the 77, which was given to us by our ancestral deity Wusa via Tahuti, the deity Tahuti. So, and you see that in the temple walls, you see that in the writings, everything took its direction from the divine world. Pretty much like how we have here now, everything takes its direction from the UN. Like in the UN, or maybe if you're like from the Christian world, it comes from the Vatican. If you're, it's physical institution that is the last word, which is the last power here on earth. Whereas in African spirituality, the last word comes from the divine world.
Yeah, and as I said, anything goes really, and there's no consequence. So they make you believe really right that it's okay. It's all right to do whatever you want. There's no consequence behind anything. And, to say sorry, they give us words, right, that has no meanings, So once you say sorry, you can keep repeating the same thing over again and just keep saying sorry. So it's like people are not, they saw that we were a people, really, right, who recognized, really, right, that there were consequences behind our actions. So we were mindful of when we did things and how we did things, knowing really right that you can't just rub out something really right and start again. It's a continuation because life is forever evolving, So.
But even if you say sorry, if you've done something and say sorry, in the usury or in the history, it still happened.
Yeah, but they make you believe.
So it doesn't take away the fact that it happened, So, and that's one thing that we learned, that the universe doesn't forgive because it's just written. It happened, and it's something that happened. But yeah, like you said, and it doesn't mean, if you've done something to someone, you can't apologize and say, I've done something wrong. But in the universe, it's written. That's what you did. That was your action. That doesn't change.
No.
So, and our ancestors understood that. And, even the concept of this heaven and hell, again, came from our ancestors, where they understand when Wusa, our ancestral god, made that journey into the Imhotep and set the Imhotep, as Naba again said, it was about this idea of paradise, this place where our god had gone and prepared. He'd set Imhotep. So before the soul, the initiate, enters into Imitet, there is a whole scene that is shown many times on the temples of the judgment scene. The people liken it to the judgment. That's where the judgment scene came from. That's where the notion of heaven and hell came from in the Christian world, where you have the scales, ma'at, where they would weigh the heart against the feather. The whole concept of the things that you do having some kind of repercussion, have some kind of concept. Our ancestors understood that, and all of that came within the realm of spirituality.
And you can see, though, I mean, when you look at, like, say, on the temples, the scale was balanced. And when you look at, like, say, what's it called, the Old Bailey, where they have the scale, that's unbalanced. So justice is never there; it's always unbalanced. So they that their scale, the way that they show it, is not actually projecting really what we're trying to aim for, to have that balance in life, that Eru set principle.
Well, again, as Naba said, Neb Naba, wrote that, and it's come from the temple. It's almost a parasitic existence that we have witnessed over these thousands of years, because the concepts, they have a similar concept. So the idea of Trinity, the idea of this mother and child, and well, we know that there's a father element, but in order to erase and to skew, just like the balance is unbalanced, to skew the family dynamics, the family principle, the Trinity, the mother, the father, and the child. Within Christianity, the father is
Well, they give us the father and
erased.
the mother is erased.
Or no. So what I mean is that with Mary and the child,
Yeah.
there is no real father. Joseph is there as a father figure, but there was a phantom who came and impregnated Mary.
Yeah.
And so, but even the concept of that, immaculate conception again traces back to Kemet times, when they talk about Aisha, the wife of Wusa, and what she had to go through in order to conceive Heru, as a result of his brother Set killing Wusa. All of these stories were told thousands of years. So when we talk about the parasitic nature, they take semblances from African spirituality. And this is what we're saying. Is there a place for African spirituality? The truth is, African spirituality is the foundation of what we see here today. It's just not told in that way. You're listening to Wisdom of the Nile show. If you want to call and get interactive, you can call on 079 444 31366. Is there a place for African spirituality in modern times?
There's no use to chat with the devil. It's useless. For me now go in a Babylon kingdom. Go beg no bread. Me now go in a Babylon kingdom. Go beg no bread. For Satan company, them are snipers. Satan company, them are snipers. Now go in a Babylon kingdom. Go beg them bread. We not tried in a Babylon kingdom. We go beg them bread. For Satan company, them a sniper, all of them. Satan company, them a sniper. What them do? They rob and they cheat the poor people all the time. They sit and keep a conference while some drink wine. Say, Satan company, them a sniper, me lord. The Satan company, yeah, them a sniper. I don't want to be in their conference at all, to try and keep poor black people down. Say, Satan company, Them a sniper, they're all Satan company. Them a sniper. So, pan them neighbor. Idle jesting. Walk the street without the Lord. Jarastafari. Satan company. Them a sniper. They all are Satan company. Them a snipers. Satan company, them a sniper, oh Jah. Satan company, them a snipers. Coming up in a Babylon kingdom, we go beg no bread. We not go in a Satan kingdom, we go beg no bread. Want to see I beg, that them run go chat. Them and them neighbor on the table, them chat about that, hey. Famine a go in a Babylon kingdom, go beg no bread. We not go in a Babylon kingdom, go beg no bread. We not go in a Babylon kingdom, go beg no bread. Just so never beg bread, we not go in a Babylon kingdom, go beg no bread. Just suffer it not. Satan company, them a snipers. Fi run come laugh at me, them a sniper. We no go in a Babylon kingdom, we go beg them bread. It's a shame. We no go in a Babylon kingdom, we go beg no bread. We are the sons of kings. Satan company, them a snipers. The Satan company, them a sniper, Lord. Satan company, them a sniper. We not follow them. A Satan company, them a sniper. Them beggy, licky, Satan company.
Sniper. Our brother Joseph Hill, otherwise known as Culture. Now going to Babylon Kingdom, we go beg them bread. Yes, you're in tune to the Wisdom of the Nile show, 07944443136. I think I put too many fours in. Let me go again. 07944431366. If you want to get interactive, if you want to share your knowledge, is there a place for African spirituality in the modern world? We are in the international section of the show where we have initiates internationally sharing their wisdom on the Wisdom of the Nile show. And hopefully we should have our Hatani. Our Hatani means the one who went before you in initiation. So many times you hear us saying the word Hatini, you may not understand who Hatinis are. So if they came into initiation before, it just means like the older one in the initiation. So we should have our Hatini Jazra from the US. She actually lives in Merita in Africa, but she should be on the call. So let me see if we can get Jazra online. Ujai, let's see if we can get the volume up. Okay. Ujai Hatini, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you speak up just a little bit? You sound a little bit. Hold on. Let me just make sure that we got all. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Hatini.
How about now? Can you hear me better?
I can hear you, but could we get the volume up? Let me just see if we can get the volume coming up a bit here. We want to make sure that we hear the wisdom that you have to share with us today. So I just want to make sure that we're hearing you loud and clear. Okay, so okay, you know what? It might just be we got the volume up on the phone. Yeah, go on again, Anthony.
Okay, I can try to speak up.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're hearing
Is
you.
that any better?
Yeah. I think we're hearing you a bit better there. Good. If you can get up a little bit more, that would be great. Okay. So Hatini Jazra, you are calling in from, because I know you live in Merita, but you are calling from the States. So before we even go any further, we want to welcome you to the Wisdom of the Nile show. Welcome.
Thank you.
And could you tell us your full name and what your name means before we go any further?
Okay. Thank you, Katasta, for inviting me on the show. Thank you, Blessed Radio. It's a great opportunity, and you've been doing a great job from week to week, keeping this consistently going. Um, yes, so my name is Jazra Shamzura. Jazra is, this is my name that I received upon graduating from initiation. And Jazra is the command or the order of Ra,
Mm,
and Shemzura is follower of Ra.
okay. Okay. So, oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Let us know that. Um, Now I understand that you actually live in Merita, so you've been on this journey for a number of years now. Could you share with us a bit about your journey, maybe even what you do in the Earth Center, so that our listeners get a picture of, what it's like for you as an initiate, and what do you do? And I know you live in Merita. Your children now go school out there, so it might be interesting to get that transition from the States to Merita.
Sure. Well, the journey has been a long one in the sense that, like many of us that find ourselves in the Earth Center, we can call ourselves seekers who may be meddled in many different whether it be religions or practices or philosophies, whatever you may want to call it. I myself had that experience prior to coming to the Earth Center. And once I found myself at the Earth Center, the way Makaru's teachings resonated with me was that kind of truth that I had been seeking. So I was in law school at the time that I began my initiation in 2008, and just finished my studies and stayed in that field for just a year before I kind of turned my life over to just committing myself to the Earth Center itself. And so I've moved about in the states to a few or several different locations, trying to assist in any capacity that I can, whether it be through teaching or moving the nonprofit aspects of the organization, just trying to move Makaru's mission, our founder's mission, forward, and then learning from my elders all along, and also traveling as many times as I could. I think maybe 5 times to Merita, with the pilgrimage that the organization does from year to year, and gaining a lot of experience with being exposed to the temple culture, the village culture, the traditions and the norms of society in Merita, traditional society, and uh, kind of reached a point where it was really time for our family to try to bring ourselves back home and immerse ourselves further into the culture, and uh, especially for our children, try to get them to be gaining that exposure outside of America, to have some different cultural values that they can be founding themselves on. So now we spent the last year there in Merita, where they were attending school, um, learning French, which is always a great experience to have the bilingual, capability or more, especially at a young age. And we've really been benefiting from being there this past year.
Hatini, can I ask you? I'm going to go right back to something you said quite earlier because I know for most people, they wouldn't be able to wrap their head around it. So I was going to go back. You said you did a law degree, you did a year, and then you left that work.
No, no. I finished the degree and I worked in the field as a lawyer for one
Right.
year.
Yeah, that's what I meant. And then after that, you decided you wasn't going to continue that path.
Yeah, I mean, as a conventional lawyer, who uh, puts on, a suit jacket and either goes to court or some form of a corporate office, I decided not to take that route.
Now, I know most people would be like, "What?" You yeah, wow, that's a huge, because for many, and this is, I think the beauty of things, for many, that is the pinnacle. They can't see anything higher than that. So many, obviously it's a lot of years and dedication, but to actually give up, or not give up, but to find a path separate to that, for many that would be hard to grasp. So, as you said, you dedicated your life to continuing the teachings of Makaru that he brought from the temples, and also you spoke about the charity side of the Earth Center. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, you speaking particularly as a nonprofit?
I should say the non-profit. Yeah, the non-profit aspect of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, the Earth Center, being relatively young as a business, though the knowledge that we're passing along within the organization is extremely, extremely old. We still find ourselves here in the West, here in the modern world, having to survive as a business, and so, um, I, along with many others, have been working to make sure that the business aspects of the organization, you know, have have its foundation as well. And so I started, contributing in that way around 2011, and I from time to time have served the Earth Center. Utilizing some of the background and experience that I have in my education, my colonial education, to assist in the Earth Center. And I should say that when I went to law school, one of my main interests was kind of the situation going on with the prison system in the West, in the United States. Were you saying something?
No, that's okay. I'm hearing you. Yes.
Okay, um, yeah, I had a kind of focus on criminal defense, as like a subject matter, just to be able to kind of get some understanding there. But recognizing at the same time, after coming to the Earth Center, that it's not a fight that I'm going to be able to win, with the approach or the mentality maybe that I had. And so the my initiation, was really the initiation that the Earth Center offers really kind of provides a sort of foundation, and stability perspective that helps us to kind of understand the situation we find ourselves in, and not letting go of that interest. With the prisons, I still, after some time, maybe 2 years ago, I was stationed in Baltimore, Maryland, where one of our schools are, and I did try to bring the initiation, some of the education, into one of the prisons there by meeting with some of the women in a correctional facility, from time to time. Moving to Merita, I wasn't able to continue, but that is something that I have my eyes on still.
Okay, so we're actually you're still using obviously the knowledge and in terms of assisting and growing the initiation. Yeah, we have to give thanks for each and every initiate. Really does bring something unique, and that's one thing I found in the initiates. You've got people from all walks of life. and it really is a community of diverse people. And it's wonderful, and everyone has the same goal of bringing forward the message to the, doing their part in ensuring that the teachings of the temples are still ongoing.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. um Hattie, the topic for today is, if is there a place for traditional African spirituality in modern times? Could I get your take on that, please?
Sure. It's a great question, and it's a big question. When you presented the topic to me, it was exciting to hear. And when I reflect on it, I have to think that um, I think just to start, a majority of the world is still functioning on traditional spiritual values that root from Merita. You know, rural societies and indigenous societies, remote areas all over the world um, are still upholding a lot of the spiritual norms and traditional values that were born out of the Nile Valley. Though they may have transformed in some shape or form and may be called something else, they're still very much alive. So though the modern world is functioning, the modern world, the developed world, whatever we call it, we have to acknowledge the fact that um, those things are still very much alive and sustaining, I think, a good majority of the world. Um, but the other thing I had to consider is that, well, as I said in the beginning, um, as a person growing up in America, growing up in a modern society, it was clear that whatever modern society was offering was just not good enough. And I think for a lot of us that have been seekers and have found initiations, we find ourselves in that similar place where we needed something else because there was a lack.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we couldn't quite name what it is or point our finger at it, but maybe once it crosses your lap, you grab it and you say,
Yeah.
okay, this is what it was.
No, please continue.
And
Yes.
yeah, so when we think of modern society versus you know whatever came before it, uh, there's certain there's certain things that just don't change, that are kind of beyond time. And so we have to acknowledge, we have to honor those things. And, whatever the earth is, whatever comes from the earth, whatever nature is presenting to us, whatever it means to come to life, to die, all of those things, despite modern um, modern waves and trends, those things stay consistent. And so a lot of our a lot of human beings kind of fundamental questions um, that maybe a person fully immersed in modern society may now not be able to find those answers, will have to return to the pre-modern way, the traditional way, the ancestral way, to get some of the answers that we were looking for, to just sort of the fundamentals um, that we need, for our own sustenance.
Yes, definitely. Um, yeah, I'm hearing that. We also have in the studio Nehipsa and another uh, sister Karsati. So I don't know if there's any questions that they want to ask you.
Ojai, actually.
Ujai.
I was interested in say that your children they're kind of learning the language. How are you coping with the language there yourself in kind of communicating?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
No,
Um, Okay. Do you want to go again?
Yeah, no, you were saying that your children were fitting in by learning the language, French. You saying? So I was wondering how are you fitting in with the language, coping with the language there?
Uh, if you're talking about when I say the language, I'm talking about French, right? Not the more traditional languages in the land of Burkina, but we're I would say I'm getting by barely. um, you know, one big advantage for them is just they're in a French speaking school. And so when they're there, they don't have any choice but to assimilate to the language. And so being more at home myself, um, I can get some exposure just going to the markets and interacting with people on the street, and then a little bit when we're at the temple. But once people know you speak English, they're gonna do their best to try to meet you with that if they have background, the
So so
English background.
so what was one of the biggest challenges for you then, kind of say leaving, like say from this Western lifestyle to kind of say going into a more relaxed, um, traditional? Yeah, well, it's more relaxed and it's less stress in its own way.
Y okay, I'm still having a little bit of a time hearing you. You said what's one of the biggest challenges I've faced making that move over there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Coming
Um,
from the West, really, right, to a different kind of cultural kind of perspective.
yeah. Well, surprisingly, the transition wasn't. Um, it never really came to me that it was something difficult because I think being in Ouagadougou, which is a city, um, a lot of the city, accommodations are there and can be comparable to what you can get in the West. And so I didn't, that kind of major assimilation challenge wasn't there. Also, coupled with having traveled to Merita several times before and stayed for months at a time, um, and had made travels back to India as well many times growing up, and so those kind of combinations helped to sort of set the stage
Mm.
for the stay. I think the body uh, particularly for the children, has this process that it has to go through of adjustment. And so, just the difference in the bacterias in the environment, the water and the foods and all of these things. There's some, challenges that the body can face in that regard. And so that, for me as a mother, that was, one of the things that I had to sort of adjust to. But it was manageable, and because we have access to the temples and the healers, we were able to always get what we needed to keep moving forward. Um, so that's a huge benefit to making the move to Merita, which can be for some very difficult, having that community there, spiritual access to kind of maintain the harmony that you need in your life. That's something that I can't speak, there's no way to really say how much of a benefit that is.
And so, like, say for someone who is thinking to say come there and live, what kind of what could you say to them? Really, what preparation? How could they prepare themselves for that transition?
Um, Preparing yourself. Well, you know, I think sometimes when people come early in the initiation, or maybe even not in the initiation, just have this idea of returning home, you have to make sure that you kind of put one foot in front of the other, um, because you don't want to just let go of everything that you have, particularly if you are building a family, you've built a family, you have certain things in place that are sustaining you or helping, helping you all to move along. You don't want to dump everything and just say, well, I'm returning home and I want to just jump 2 feet in and make it happen. You want to kind of have a plan of some kind in place, um, because some of those adjustments, like cultural adjustments, you just only be able to really be able to do that once um, once you actually make the move itself. You can't completely prepare yourself for all of those kind of things. But I wouldn't go there assuming, yes, some things are, for example, monetarily less expensive than living in the West, but you still want to go there with a plan of sustaining yourself,
Yeah, definitely.
because there are still expenses nonetheless. Um, so, if you're associated with the Earth Center as an initiate and you have some plan to be associated with the Earth Center in Ouagadougou, or going, to Togo where we have temples and things there, you would want to make the proper communications, establish some kind of a plan before jumping.
Well,
I don't know if that answers your question.
yeah, yeah, it does really, because I'm supposed there are a lot of people really, right, who they'll probably go there for a week and they think, yeah, this is good, but the logistic really like of actually going there to live, and as you say, monetary kind of finding the means to survive there, because obviously you have to be doing something to sustain yourself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I think, well, two things. Nowadays, because there's so many opportunities to do things online, I guess depending on your background or not, if you have entrepreneurial skills and are willing to start up, there are things that you may be able to bring in income and work remotely. You can have internet access there and things like that. So, that's something practically speaking. But then also another thing to consider, that I had heard from my elders, was, you kind of go step by step, in the sense that maybe if you're coming for the first time, you visit for a month or two, then you come back for, a longer stay, maybe 4 months, and you just sort of extend your stay, um, until you're ready to make a full immersion, just to have that sort of transitionary experience.
well,
That makes sense, doesn't it?
yeah, it
Yeah,
sure does. Yeah.
you ease in, because I mean, it's been for those of us in the um, Caribbean who made that journey through the Caribbean. It's we've got that kind of middle place, because the Caribbean kind of presents almost a mini version of Africa, especially if you come from places like Jamaica and so forth. But anywhere in the Caribbean, really, it's a mini version. But actually, again, when you go back to Africa, because at least in Jamaica everybody's speaking English. When you go to Merita, people are speaking their traditional tongue, and they're living in traditional ways that actually is not still present. And maybe very small communities may hold some semblance of it, but not to the depth that you would see in Merita, and especially if you're around the tradition in terms of the spiritual tradition. That's a whole another thing again. So, yeah, to be able to make that leap with your family, um, more of us need to be making that. In fact, I know there's an initiate who'll be going down tomorrow, and they're not looking to come back. We're not calling any names, but so she's making that transition tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow she's leaving tomorrow. So hopefully, Jazra, when you're back in Merita, you can be spending some time down there with her, and helping to show her the ropes.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, everybody's experience is a little bit different, but as we build community over there, I think that's going to help people, coming and going.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do: build solid communities that are rooted in communities, in the traditional community. Because sometimes there is this way of people leave from England, or they leave from America, they go back to Africa, they build this big house in the middle of a village. I mean, how are you fitting in with the people there? You've got this sign of enormous wealth, where you've got your big car, you're driving past the villages. That's not returning home. That's just kind of you like relocating, and you know that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about becoming a part of the community, you know, and you know there's things that you're going to be able to share there, but there are definitely things that they will be able to share with you. So yeah, it is making that transition. Was you going to say something, Nibsa?
Yeah, you said that as with your law experience and that, surely, how does that benefit that community down there with like the Europeans coming in really right and trying to impose certain things on them? Are you able to use that skill to help them to maneuver themselves?
No, I haven't used that any, I haven't really done any legal work or anything there. The 10 months that I was there, was really just kind of adjusting with the family and the kids. Haven't thought about how I could do that in a practical way. Um, but it's, interesting that you bring up that question. Um, I think, uh, yeah, just being there, it's kind of trying to absorb as much as I can with the culture there and how people just from a day to day are functioning, how the temple is functioning, just trying to gain those kind of understandings rather than coming with sort of the colonial education that I have to see where that fits.
Yeah, do well for that really. So at least say you're there setting the pace for others to come really right. So hopefully one day when I make that journey, yeah, you would have opened up a lot of doors and make it easier for us who was thinking about coming, you know?
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, even those that went before me, I think everybody's sort of assisting each other in that process. And, I can't underestimate the value of just, even maybe if you don't process it in the moment and it's sort of a more reflective experience of just being able to see how people function in a society, even though it's a city, and even though that, I mean, I'm speaking specifically of Ouagadougou, is a city that has, colonial influences and religious influences, but there's certain things that haven't left the people. Like I know Katasta was saying, you guys were talking about the 77 commandments. The 77 commandments may not be posted in people's homes, but it's an underlying norm. There's certain cultural norms that people just live by, even if they may not be calling it that. And so to see people kind of functioning with a common understanding, a common set of principles, a common set of values, where the society can manage itself because of that united understanding. It's a big difference from what we see in modern society where everything has to be micromanaged, everything has to be policed, everybody has to be told what to do. It's like we're just, robots and zombies kind of moving around, and you go there and you're like trying to wake that aspect of yourself back up, you know. And so whatever it takes to try to relearn, our roles as human beings, as the whatever gender we're in, whatever how we fit in the generational roles, how we relate to our elders and to the youth, what it means to educate your children and rear your children, at home versus the role that the educational system plays. How you take care of your home. I mean, there's just so many, basics that everyday life, when you're there, you can start to absorb. And so for that reason, I encourage, even if someone's not making their full move over there, being able to spend some time back and forth is going to benefit, anyone.
I mean, last week we had Naba speaking about initiation and the importance of it, and so like getting our children from an early age and instilling in them really certain values will also probably make it easy for them for that cultural difference because they would have meaningfulness to their life knowing what they actually came for to do. you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and the role that a community plays, even just looking at his children, looking at, other children living, within the temple itself is like you just have so many positive influences assisting the child in their development as not just one or two people.
As they say, it takes a village, isn't it, to raise a child? So here, where everyone is by themselves, really everybody's looking out for themselves, where you're exposing that to what a proper community really is about now, and you can compare the difference, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I mean, it's like, you hear that saying, and when you hear people use that saying a lot, but to see that in its in reality and kind of the everyday use of it, where you sometimes can be in a village and you don't even know whose child is whose,
Mm-hmm.
because any parent can deal with that child like it's truly their own.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from modern society, we have just that very kind of independent, individualistic way of functioning. So, um, these are the type of things that you see in real time beyond theory and philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so important because you're raising a human being, and in this society, human beings are being raised to be instruments for the system. So, it's heartening to know you're raising human beings for their own becoming, not for the end product of a system.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Hattie, is there anything else that you would like? Oh, so was you going to ask another question, Hipsa?
No, 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 it's
No, no,
fine.
if you were going, please do.
Um, you speak
Oh
a
no,
little
I
bit.
was just going to say, no, actually I was going to say if there was anything else that she wanted to share with any of the listeners that, that they could learn from. So before I ask that question, there may be something you wanted to
No,
ask.
no. As you speak on, really, something
Okay.
will come to me. Yeah, because I'm sure
Okay.
there's a lot perhaps you can share really, right, for us really who are here, who because it's a big move really, right, to say to pick up your family and
Mm-hmm.
just go forth really, right, and do what she's done really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I commend her really.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Um, but that's the way that, if we're looking back to Africa, and the reality is that it is, and and I just, like, you can hear she's very measured in how she speaks and what she's saying, because to pick up your children and to
Mm-hmm.
take them to another country, totally different language. First of all, English isn't the first language, it's French, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of not the traditional. And then there's a traditional language. And then, as an adult, how difficult it is for us adults to learn a language. So, the challenges that she must face as an
Mm-hmm.
adult. Um, but, I think it's just so apt, you expose yourself, then you come away, then you expose, if you're really serious about returning,
Mm-hmm.
you know so that, and we have to get back into the culture, and I think it's a very measured, level-headed, logical way of going about things. How do you maintain yourself while you're there? And then, of course, having that community, priceless. I think it's priceless. Is there anything else that you would share with the listeners, Hatini, that you think would be important for them to know at this time?
Um, I guess the maybe last thing I would add is that, modern society doesn't acknowledge the immaterial or the unseen aspects of existence. And just, when we talk about, is there a place for spirituality and tradition in modern society? Well, not acknowledging the immaterial, I mean, we can't see that as an option. And to be functioning in modern society, surely we can do it and not acknowledge that aspect of existence, because we see that many people are moving in that way. I can't speak to all of them, but what I can say for myself is that, um, starting to do that, starting that process, having engaged in that process for almost just over a decade now, is there's a level of stability that comes that uh, really should have been there all along. Because that's what's normal.
That's
We
right.
see in modern society people suffering from many, kind of mental instabilities. Depression is it's more normal to have depression than not to, or at least bouts of depression, a variety of health issues, um, you know, being born with illnesses, and all of these things that have very real remedies. But we have to acknowledge the unseen realm to reach some of those remedies. And so it's like we act like we have a choice, but it's not a real choice that we have, because if we don't face it now in the world of the living, surely we will have to face it later on, when we make our transition, when we are trying to position ourselves after this thing here we call life, or the world of the living. And so we don't want to reach a place where we find it's too late. And as an initiate of the Umtam schools, as somebody who has hugely benefited from the education and the spiritual traditions born out of Merita, I just can't recommend enough the need to you can live your modern life, but there's a need to still acknowledge certain fundamentals. Just like you have to eat food, you have to drink water, you have to sleep. There's certain things within spirituality that we have to learn from a teacher, and we have to apply in our lives.
So, the doors of initiation are waiting for you, for those who are listening, to walk through if you want to know how to walk the road of an initiate, and this is really what Hattie is sharing with you, knowledge that she's gained from being in the initiation, and ultimately she's now living in Merita with her family, so we salute those who have made that transition.
It goes back to the little video clip that Neb Naba to speak about panhandlers, people here reading books and believe that they know about spirituality and cultural values, but it's something that, as he said, you can't learn that from a book. You have to go and live it.
No, you have to live it. That's right. That's right. Hatini.
Katasta.
Hatini Jazra Duwawa Isa for the time. So thanks much for Duawu Isa for sharing with us some of your journey, some of the insights that you have shared with those who are listening today. And we hope that the words that you have shared falls on fertile ground. The seed falls on fertile ground, and they begin to make the transition. And we will be giving out the number for the Earth Center if anyone is interested in coming to sit in on the classes to hear a bit more about what initiation is. You can come in and sit in and listen to a class, or if you want to purchase any of the products that we have, or if you want to make a journey with the Earth Center to Merita, you can do that. The option is open to you. So when the annual pilgrimage happens, so we'll be letting you know a bit more about that after this section of the show. So Hatini Jazra, Duwao again for the knowledge that you've shared with us on the Wisdom of the Nile show. And we look forward to you returning and speaking with us again.
Okay, duo everybody.
Yeah, duo.
And Wisdom of the Nile, Bless Radio. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.
And we hope your experience is fruitful.
Continues to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Duao.
Thank you.
Duo.
Iriheru. Standing firm on the promised land. Yes, that was our Hattini Jazra speaking about her time in the initiation, the fact that she's actually returned to Merita and she's done that with her children. Her partner, Nehez, Zeshmi Nehez, was here a month or so ago, and he was also talking about the husband. He was talking about the transition, so to really make that as a family, it heartens and strengthens others who want to make, and there are others who are out there, in the community. So, we give thanks and say dua to those who are out there. Now, I just want to share some information. We have this Saturday, the 22nd of June, 4 till 7 p.m. We have orientation at the Coventry School. So the Earth Centre's opened a school in Coventry. This is in the UK, Midlands. And so at 18 Biggin Hall Crescent, Coventry CV3 1GS, there will be orientation. And that's this Saturday, the 22nd of June, 4 till 7 p.m. And orientation is the time when those who are interested in going into initiation, those who are going into initiation, you can come, and it will basically orientate you into what not Inushifi, you've got a long way to go to Inushifi. That's the next level, per Ankh. What per Ankh is, they're going to hear a lot of Inushifi, they're going to hear a lot of that. So if you are interested in learning the wisdom of the ancients, particularly that from the Dagomba people, you are welcome to come to Coventry this Saturday, the 22nd of June, 4 till 7 p.m. And that's at the Earth Centre, Coventry, 18 Biggin Hall Crescent, Coventry CV3 1GS. If you would like to call anyone there, you can do so on 024 7626 6859. That's 024 7626 6859. Or if you want to contact via the mobile, you can also do that on 073 0599 594. That's 073 0599 5944. Or you can go on Meetup. It's meetup.com, Coventry. So that's the orientation. If you've seen the flyer, you'll see that the lectures were £7. The orientation is free. So there's no cost for the orientation. And in London, we had our lecture on Saturday, which was the 15th of June, on the importance of family, a Dokan perspective. And this is the third part of the series. It's going to be held at the London School the 13th of July, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And it's spiritual purification and Kemetic movements. This is where the origins of yoga comes from. So we'll be having a talk at the school with a demonstration of what we call Ka'atibi. We will be having that at the school. And so for those who are interested in knowing a bit more about that, you're welcome to come on Saturday the 13th of July, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. and that's £7. You can go on justtickets.com. And the address of the school is 21 Sunnyside Road, London, E10 7BB. If you want to contact the school, you can do that on 0207 175 4144. That's 0207 175 4144. Or you can email us at inquiries-uk@theearthcentre.org. That's inquiries-uk@theearthcentre, and that's centre with a TER.org, or you can go on our website www.theearthcentre.org. Okay, Kasati is saying no. Are we not using that one anymore? Okay, but they can go if they want to go and get some information. Yeah. So this flyer might not be on the website, but if you want to know more about the Earth Centre, you can go onto the website that we've just given you. Now, have you heard about this proposal that is being put forward in Jamaica? They are proposing that the Obeah law be made the law which has there's a law in place in Jamaica which if you practice, and we'll put this in inverted commas, Obeah, so this is traditional African science but they've named it Obeah, there was a law put in that you can be prosecuted for that. And so now they are now exploring, and people have brought it into Parliament, and people have brought up, look, it's a spirituality like any other spirituality. It should have a chance. It should be able to exist amongst any other. So now it's actually going into public domain. They're talking about in Parliament to legalize Obeah in Jamaica. So this part of the show is current affairs. We're now talking about current affairs. What's your thoughts on that, my brother?
Well, we know that Obeah, as even although they say that it might be illegal, is something which is still being practiced, and it's been going on ever since, really, from a long time, since basically we were taken as enslaved people to the islands. And as you said, it was our spiritual base, which they've more or less made it. Well, the British basically, they're the ones that that actually made it kind of say illegal, and put this law in place really to stop us really like from using our spiritual practices. That was part of our strength really, that we used to fight them off. And because they recognize really, right, that the power and the strength in it, then that's why they made it kind of illegal for us to practice it really, because yeah, that was their way of kind of subduing us and keeping us down.
Well, actually, in the 18th century, you had Africans. Taki, I think his name was.
Taki,
Yeah, he was one of the freedom fighters. He was a revolutionary. He was from Ghana, the Akan people in Ghana. And just like Nanny of the Maroons, who is the only female hero, Jamaican hero, she too was from Ghana, and she used traditional knowledge to fight the British soldiers. And they said she did things like catch bullets and would set a pot down, and the pot would just keep cooking without fire. You know, they used natural science to fight those who were trying to enslave them. And he was one of them. And we also know that, you know, wherever Africans were gathering, they feared it, because there was actually a rebellion that went on for a long time where they were freeing other Africans, where they were burning plantations, and, you know, they were liberating themselves. They were getting out of the bonds of slavery. And once Europeans, the British at the time, were able to quell these uprisings, what they did was put in the Obeah law, because what was happening was Africans were coming together and using their traditional powers. That's what it was, their traditional powers. And Europe decided, the British decided, oh, obviously, you know, it's upsetting their production line, really, because they were producing sugar and sending over, and rum and all the other things. So they made a law that when people gathered, when Africans were gathering, and we still see that today, when you see groups of, you know, black chilled people gathering. And I certainly know in like the 80s and 90s, where, you know, when there was a group of us, you'd always have like a policeman would come up and, you know, would want to disperse us just because we were gathering and talking. And none of us had any bad intention. We were just meeting. So this Obeah Act was put in. Now it's being debated in Parliament in Jamaica. Kasati, I know you had you have some thoughts on that. Would you share your understanding with us?
Yes.
let's share this one.
Yes, my concern when I heard this news is I know that obeah is not something that has originally been used for evil, but I've noticed, having lived in Jamaica as well, that the majority of people who do use that system, it's generally for evil purposes. So I'm believing, and because the country is predominantly Christian, who are against us practicing our traditional beliefs or systems, spiritual systems, they look at obeah as evil in the same way that voodoo is looked on upon as evil. So my fear is that people are going to be pitched against each other. Many people who practice herbalism may also practice forms of obeah, but for a positive reason. So I think there's going to be a lot of conflict in Jamaica due to this, and I'm not seeing it as a good thing, other than the fact that I believe people who are against it, based on their Christian beliefs, need to rethink the fact that Christianity was something that was imposed upon us. It's still being imposed upon us. And if we don't return back to working with nature, move away from colonial mentality, that things are not going to change.
Sorry, when you say it's not a good thing, could you clarify what you mean by that?
No, I believe that most people take it as not a good thing because many people in Jamaica use it for the wrong purposes. They use it to tie somebody, to hold somebody to them. They use it to gain material possessions. So the majority of people look at it as a negative thing, but traditionally it was never used for negativity.
Okay. You see, this is the thing. Human beings are human beings. That's it. This is, how's it? Human beings have what we call heroseth in them. They have the good and the evil in them. And we see that within this lily white so-called Christianity, if we're talking about using it for material gain, the church is the wealthiest body on the planet, probably second to maybe some of the royal families. If you want to talk about using spirituality to get material gains, they're the kings of that. So we were they've used their religion, and if you're talking about to manipulate people or to put people under their control, or to kill people, because in the name of Christianity, hundreds of thousands have been, we can go into millions, because through the Middle Passage in the name of Christianity we were taken. So I you see, they say if you're going to make an omelette, you have to break some eggs. If you are going to back to traditional culture and traditional spirituality, because those that are sitting on top in the seat of power at the moment are the ones that impose this law, for example the Obeah Act, because it was challenging them. And the same ones who brought the law in are the same ones who brought in this Christianity and this mindset that's in place. So if it's anything that's going to be shaken up, it's because of what they've imposed, whether it be on a white person or black person is carrying the mentality of the colonial person. It's going to shake. The thing is, it's going to shake the colonial system. And that system is entrenched in human beings. So the people that we hear crying out against them, I mean, we saw a clip which you put up of the pastor, and the first thing he said is, when we talk about Obeah, it's an evil thing. Now it was interesting, the the journalist who was interviewing him said, something about, have we ever seen it in the Bible? But, and he speaks about, in the Bible, it said you shouldn't use witchcraft and so forth. But it's very interesting because if we saw an Obeah man, now this is someone who practices African spirituality. I'm going to take away the Obeah because that's the word they put on it. It's traditional African spirituality. They're using wisdom of the nature, let's say. They're using knowledge of nature. If they saw a man taking a jug of water and then he turned it into wine and he was a so-called Obeah man, all hell would break loose. You see, this is what I'm saying. But if they saw someone who was dead and this Obeah man went over them and said some words and raised that person from the dead, oh my God. Can you imagine if they did that? Yeah? But it was okay for Christ to do it.
That, yeah.
It's the double standards.
But not just that though. You have, like, say, for example, in Jamaica, there you have the Indians and people like that over there that's actually practicing their own thing, which is the same thing. And they're they're legally doing it. Yet something which, as we said, it was our spiritual base.
It's what we came to the Caribbean with, and when we wanted to fight them, we used it. That's how the Haitians were able. Over 30,000 troops went onto the Haitian island with a few thousand. The Haitian massacred 30,000 of the troops, or if it was 60, and only 5 left the island alive. They used it through their traditional spirituality. Now, to the European, that's going to be like a horror to them. To the Haitians, it's victory. So when we're talking about it's evil, evil to who?
That's
because to the African who was taken out of their homeland, kidnapped and brought to the West and abused in the most awful way, that's evil. And if they're going to use their traditional knowledge to overcome that evil, to them that cannot be evil.
You see, what's happened is that they've created this crab in a barrel syndrome within us. We've been starved and deprived for so long. And so rather than, like what we're going through initiation where we can work together and develop together as a community, we were taught to fight against each other. So when you're starving and it's like, as I said, it's this crab in a barrel syndrome really, yeah. And I think what they're probably hoping for, just like when they come and they put the gun down there, they see us self-destruct. So in a sense, they're perhaps looking at the mindset and the mentality of the people them now, and seeing that if they were to put that out there, probably more of them would go and use it and self-destruct on themselves. But to say like, our importance on now, like say going through initiation and learning certain values and things, if the people them did actually recognize the value of what they have, the power in what they have, yeah, and using it in its constructive way, really, yeah, then these churches and state that's there kind of still keeping the people them really docile, yeah. If you notice, it's a lot of the Christian people them out there really who are opposed to it because they're fearing that once the people them come back to their spirituality, their church and state and their religious belief really right is going to subside, yeah, and that revenue that they'll be getting from that is going to be going somewhere else as well. So they're in fear of that because all of the time, all you kept hearing them saying was in the name of Jesus, this Jesus concept all the time. And we've forgotten our ancestors, yeah, because this is what it was. This is what the Obeah was supposed to be, where we use nature and recognize our ancestors to do things. Yeah.
But Christianity has taught them that when you're dead, you're dead. If we mention our dead relatives, our ancestors, we're dealing with evil. So this is the issue, as well as the fact that if Christianity was such a great thing, why is Jamaica, that has more churches per capita per population than anywhere else in the world, also has the highest murder rates? So what is Christianity actually doing for Jamaica on a positive level? I can't see it.
You're listening to the Wisdom of the Nile show. 07944431336. But actually, we're getting ready to seal up the show now. But yes, we were just reasoning on the motion that's been put forward in Parliament, in Jamaican Parliament, that they want to legalize Obeah. That's the terminology that they're using. We're talking about practicing African spirituality without fear of reprisal. That's basically it. And it would be good if we can get priests like Naba, Iritash, and Mira to go over and have a word with them about what this is really, because the reality is a lot of them don't even really understand what it is, the fullness of the reality. Because even when I saw the interview, it just showed me how far away they are from actually understanding what African spirituality is. But the fact that they're willing to talk about it 10, 15 years ago, you weren't going to have that. You were not having that kind of conversation. No way. So the time is coming. The time is coming where our ancestors, have to take back their rightful place, where Heru must reclaim his father's kingdom. Because those are one of the things that one of the questions that was asked by his father, and Heru answered, that he needs to reclaim his father's kingdom and to follow the 77. So the time is coming where we're reclaiming what's ours. And when the bloodlines, those children of the ancestors, start standing up and reclaiming their ancestral heritage, then the ancestors will be able to come and work through them to carry out what needs to be done. You have been listening to the Wisdom of the Nile show. I'm Katasta Fakara.
And I am Nehipsa Nesibik.
And I am Kasati Hekama.
We will be coming again to you live next week, unless there's any last.
Well, I'm
Because I can see like there's some anticipation there. So let
no,
my brother Nehipsa.
no. I mean, this Obeah thing here, really, right? It's not just in Jamaica that it's going to kind of resonate, because we have to look at, like, say, where we are now within the Earth Center, and this is a spiritual organization. And I remember, like, say, when I told my my daughter's grandmother about, like, say, coming through initiation, and it's like, to them back home, it's like they see the negative side of it, because that's all that was shown to them. And she was saying, no, don't get involved. So we have to think that, when we put that down there, which we're putting ourselves down here as well, because we're trying to reignite this traditional knowledge that we're learning now, going through initiation. So it's the same thing. Many people look at this as being evil also, and every time we stand firm, really try to bring ourselves forward again, something negative is put in the way, really, right? And it's like a little ripple.
And the thing is, who is the one who gave that negative? Who said that it was negative? Here, our brother Sizzler.
Yeah. Don't seduce to reduce my knowledge, because I will always break those barriers and burn down bondage. Oh Lord God Almighty, grant me all privilege. You see, I have to overcome all the wicked, them and them false things. I have no white God, don't teach me anything wrong. Who the white God save me from white man oppression? I have no white God, it's just a black messiah. If a white God that bless, so him not blesses. I have no white God, don't teach me anything wrong. Who the white God save me from white man oppression? I have no white God, it's just a black messiah. If a white God that bless, so him not bless. I want what is rightfully mine, so me not stay mute. Your system is designed to distract me from the truth, but it will come to pass. I know not to the youth. In the process of time, we will know.
Yes, because we know that that's not from our ancestors. That's not from our people. So the evil that they talk about actually came from the mouth of the same persons who were doing evil unto us.
Yeah.
In the name of their God, whatever name their God they called it, Sizzla Kalonji.
Be conquered in this white man oppressed. I am no white God, it's just a black messiah. A white God that bless you, him not bless. Oh, me face contact with anger, cause that no right. Oh, good all things, good and valuable must be white. So, what about the black that did the most in life? You want your white supremacy, watching me as you change the version of the Bible. Oh, you watch it, remember all who do evil won't go unpunished. Bear your iniquity, you have no wisdom or wit. All evilous people shall sink in I am no white God. Don't teach me.
You've been listening to Wisdom of the Nile show. We want to thank you for tuning in with us this week. We will be back again next week.
Bless him, not bless his love. I'm no white God. Don't tell me anything wrong. Who the white God save me from white man oppressed? I am no white.
Nanabo, la musa moro dene bigo. Dete zamanita woli. Inota toku, wechi di kubuni. Di kututa futulu mamuku di genduose. Afaga bivai, mahiru. Tukunu materu naba. Naba, naba, mahiru naba. Naba, 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 mahiru naba. Prophet Neblawa la musa moro dene bigo. Big dog on the truth teller. The prophet never la musa moro dene bigo. The chosen one, the Messiah. Naba, naba, khairu naba. Otabla bana bilege naba. Isina basa ile muge naba. Masi otabla bana bilege naba. Isina basa ile muge naba. Dikizi yo mti defense. Dikizi yo mti defense. Amerita biya no